You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohmann. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohmann.
Hey, welcome everybody. Lots to catch up on. So much banning and purging in the news, but Doug, you and I talked a couple months ago about this podcast for this period of time, and we said, like, we would just sort of not do the news, and we would talk about things that interested us. And what I wanted to talk about was I kind of made a connection about cults and my own intellectual journey. Not that I'm in a cult, but I don't think I'm in a cult, but.
That's the first sign you're in a cult, by the way.
Hey, it's not me. I'm talking about other people. It's not me.
It is you.
Yeah, it's me. And then we'll do that. And I don't know about you. We were just talking about how much we have going on in our personal lives. And I have such a long list of crap that I'm working on. So I'm still really avoiding the news and social media because I'm just so busy. And as a result of being this busy, I've instead been binge watching a YouTube channel that I just discovered.
Nice.
Yeah, because
we got to talk about that.
You know, I want to bring it up because I want to give a shout out about this channel. It's called Charisma on Command. And I mean, you guys everybody knows me. This is not an advertisement, but I stumbled across this channel yesterday. And I literally cannot stop watching it. And
wow.
The show,
what's it about?
It's about charisma, and the show is charismatic. It's like
that
a bag
makes
of,
sense.
I know. It's run by two guys, and you never know which guy's going to do the video. And they're both really great. And they're kind of these short little vignettes about, I mean, they do a great job of, like,
Sonny, you haven't joined a cult, have you?
It might have joined a cult about charisma.
Wow, this is like such a strange
I'm telling you,
journey you're taking.
I mean, I'm feeling like I need to study this as a YouTuber and find out how to make myself, not so much the tips on charisma, because I actually think a lot of what they're talking about is for people who have trouble socially, I think. I don't really have the problem.
So it's like a how-to, or it's like kind of inspiration on how to be charismatic?
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
Right. But it gets into, like, so for example, they cover different celebrities. Like, why do people like Jennifer Lawrence so much? What is she doing that's so likable? What is The Rock doing? What's James Bond, the guy who plays James Bond, what's he doing? What's Trump doing versus the other politicians? And then they get into, like, your Game of Thrones characters. Like, why do this is a spoiler if you guys aren't Game of Thrones people, so you might want to turn this off. It's not a spoiler for season 8, just in general of the series, so turn off for 2 seconds. The Starks, they always get killed. And he's like, why do the Starks always get killed? Like, what are they doing wrong? And it's super insightful because it's true. And one of the things that's great about the Game of Thrones fiction is that it's actually somewhat realistic. I mean, you have this family called the Starks, and they're really moral people. But what do they do wrong? And they have no empathy. And that's what they do wrong. They can't anticipate their enemies. They're just like these moral, pure, good guys who are going to be honest no matter what. And that leads and they expect other people should be like them, rather than saying, hey, the reality is people aren't like us, and so we need to watch our back.
Wow.
And the author of Game of Thrones is such a good character writer because he really does draw these characters, I think, from real life, and then also they're consistent. So when I watched that, I was like, oh my God, that's right. That's exactly why they get killed and why they should get killed, you know?
Why they should.
Right, like it's logical.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, here's one here, how to be sarcastic without being a jerk. And they look like they're going to focus on the character that that superhero character, villain, kind of good guy who was like a burn victim dude. What the hell is his name? Why can't I remember He wears a red leather outfit. He's played by that funny guy, that actor.
I don't know. Sorry.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
As long as you're not living on a compound somewhere in the country with like a guy named Gary.
Deadpool.
Giving him like. Oh yeah.
Deadpool, Ryan.
I haven't
Reynolds.
watched that one, but.
So how to be sarcastic without being a jerk, and then they're gonna play clips from that movie to show like he's so sarcastic, but not in a jerky way. Like you still like him, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I mean, video after video like this, how to flirt with girls featuring Russell Brand, you know, just kind of crazy stuff.
Interesting.
Why is Jordan Peterson? Why does he get so much respect? What's he doing?
Are there any like key takeaways, or is it like each person is different? Are there a couple principles that we can tease out of this?
Let's see.
Or do you just have it or you don't?
No, they absolutely aren't saying you have it or you don't. They're saying you can learn how to be more charismatic. And it's like things not to do, things to do. One thing, like if you're going to tell a story, don't qualify with negatives. Like, well, I'm really stupid, but here's my story, you know, and instead, you know, start out with, oh, I got this great story to tell you. Like you have to own it and kind of buy your own. And when you're going to tell a joke, you have to own the joke and go for it. You can't hold back and be timid about it.
That's so hard to do.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good rule. You're never no one's gonna laugh at your joke if you don't commit to it.
It's almost like acting skills in a way.
Kind of is. I mean, even if you're gonna be embarrassed, you have to commit. And like how to tease people without offending them. You can't tease them for, this should be obvious, but you can't tease them for things that they might actually be insecure about. You know, you don't tease a person who's fat about being fat. That would be horrible. You would look like the bad guy. But if you want to use teasing to connect with people, so that's obviously you don't want to actually insult them. I mean, you are insulting them, but you're insulting them about things that don't matter, unimportant things.
Okay. Yeah, I see that even in friends.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
right.
There are friends I know that are probably insecure about one thing or the other. I probably wouldn't bring that up. Maybe. Sometimes I would.
Like how,
it was a really good friend.
How I tease you about sounding like you just woke up.
What? What are you talking about? Why would you even say that?
Are you insecure about that?
Just kidding. Shit.
It's such an important thing for you, how you sound.
It is so
how you sound when I call you.
I really want people to think I'm just chippy and perky all the time. If you... God.
Yeah, so I mean, there are really good tips, but it's mostly just they do what gets. First of all, I'm just sucked in because they do a good job, and it's like potato chips. You know, I get to watch why Chris Pratt is charismatic as F. You know, and
so this is sort of weaves some celebrity stuff and interesting characters into the mix.
Cultural phenomenons, like.
Yeah.
And then using that to give you lessons on being more charismatic and more friendly. And, you know, and I watched one where he had Will Smith and Jaden Smith and how each of them in the same interview handled being interrupted, and how the one, you know, Will Smith obviously completely commanded the situation regardless of being interrupted, whereas Jaden just kind of ended up defeated. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of
totally.
like, oh, okay, I see that. And I don't know why that was just fun to watch. It's just fun to watch the analysis of this. And then for me, it's like, whoa, these guys have really figured out a formula on YouTube where really every video is interesting, and you watch it and they're short and you kind of can't wait. And then in the recommended, they have these great thumbnails, and you just keep clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking. Oh my God, I got to watch the one that says dealing with haters. Stand up for yourself without being a jerk.
Man, you're in a rabbit hole.
With a picture of Robert Downey Jr. on it.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah,
could you not click on that?
Well, have you ever gone to like Zerg? I think is it Zerg.net or some ZergNet or something? There, it's like a whole wall or page of clickbait items, and there's got to be like 20 that occupy the screen. And even though I'm somewhat immune, I'm not immune to clickbait. I can't say that, but like everyone is so seductive. Like, about a like, see how this star looks now, and you're like, oh, I really want to look at that,
Oh my God. I mean, when I have spare time, I will sometimes read the most ridiculous celebrity stuff. Like the 26 times Meghan Markle wore the wrong thing. Or it's just something so
I can't do
dumb.
that. Yeah, you're on another level.
Yeah, I'm on another level. But what I will never click on is epic SmackDown, or I've been burned too many times clicking on some of those types of titles that I'm not.
I get burned by the obvious. We're trying to get a horny guy to clickbait, like, see how this started. She's hot. See how she looks now. And I'm like, all right, I got to see this model or something. Right. And it's always like, Bill, it starts with like Bill Cosby or something. I'm like, what is this? This isn't what and then like 72 slides later.
Oh my God, right?
Picture of some girl in a
click
bikini,
through. They make you
man.
click through. I clicked on the other day. This is so funny. It's exactly what we're talking about. You remember that movie from the 80s, Annie?
Yeah.
That little actress with the red hair. So the title was, basically like, wow, did she grow up pretty? Wow, look, see how beautiful the actress who played Annie has become.
You're never going to see that actress.
So
You still haven't seen her, I guarantee it.
That's exactly what happened.
It's like, where is she? What is this about? It's not even about actresses. It's not even about Annie. It's just.
So I'm clicking picture of her as a little girl. 1 page, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I realize I've clicked through 7 pages.
Next thing you're buying muscle milk or something like that. It's like, what the hell happened?
So then I go to Google and I just Googled her name.
Yeah.
To look at an image of her today. And guess what? Not beautiful.
Really?
Not beautiful.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
So this is the kind of thing that they have, but these people deliver, let me tell you. So it's, how to be witty, and then a picture of Conan O'Brien. And you will actually enjoy watching that. It's an 8-minute video on why Conan O'Brien is witty and how to kind of adopt some of those. You're not going to be Conan O'Brien, but
how much of it is, do you think, is not the substance but the style? Because what you're describing, a lot of it is just your manner and your personality and the way you approach things. But a lot of these people, like Conan O'Brien's legitimately a funny, witty guy.
Right.
Like there's only so much you could. But how much do you think of it is just style? And
one thing he was talking about in one of the videos, he said the way that you can become funnier and wittier is to watch a lot of comedy and laugh at more stuff yourself.
Yeah.
You just have to get in that mode. And from my own experience, I learned that I get way wittier when I'm writing jokes. If I'm actively writing jokes, you're basically training your mind. I mean, you get better at a crossword if you do the crossword every day. It's the same thing. So if you try to be witty, you'll embarrass yourself for about a month, and then you'll be witty. Lo and behold, it will suddenly click, and you'll be like the life of the party. But a lot of things, like I noticed, I already do those things, and that was kind of interesting too. Was sort of learning. Oh yeah, I do that, which is, I really laugh easily, and that is a charismatic trait. And you can develop that by watching a lot of comedy, and I watch a lot of comedy, so. If you're with a group of friends and you're laughing at their jokes a lot, that makes you fun to be around.
I've been around people that laugh too much, and then they get annoying because you think that they're insecure.
Well, it can't be fake. That's something too. It can't be fake. It has to be like they're legitimately amused by you.
I don't think I laugh enough.
No, you don't. You clearly have the most droll.
But I watch a ton of you know what though?
Ever.
You'd be shocked because like 80% of my life is probably watching comedy, and yet I just sit here and like stare at it.
You don't ever laugh out loud?
I do.
Okay. I know that you laugh because it's one of the things I like about you is you laugh at my jokes. You know what I mean? And that makes me, I think, funnier around you because it feeds me. It makes me want to tell the next joke. You know? So, and I think people who laugh at other people, I think we have more fun because we bring out funny in people who would normally feel maybe like when I'm around people who don't laugh at my jokes, when I started doing comedy videos, I had friends that said to me, I didn't know that you were funny. I'm like, well, that's actually commentary on you more than it is on me, because that means when I was around you, I didn't tell jokes. Like, why would that be?
That's pretty deep. I don't know. But everyone has a different personality depending on who you're around. I'm a total chameleon in some ways. If I have some friends that I can be really, I think, funny and engaging, and I have some friends that are not friends, but just people I know that are kryptonite, where you just I can't funny. I have to be serious. I don't know. I hate that
after
about
you've
myself.
Told 3 or 4 jokes and gotten nothing, you're done. I'm not gonna give that part of my personality away.
Yeah.
One of the best videos that I watched on this show was one about Mark Zuckerberg and like why we think he's evil.
Yes.
And they break it down, and it's
Really?
for real. Like when he
I like these guys.
Like when he has the main reason why we think that he's vicious is because his words don't match his face.
Yes. I was just going to say he has a sense of insincerity about him. Like you can tell it's almost like he's reading something.
It's incongruity. I don't know if that's the right word, but where if he says, I don't know what you mean, he doesn't furrow his brow. It's like this plastic brow, and he's just saying, I don't know what you mean, like a robot. That's why he gets the jokes about being a robot. And the guy said that he actually doesn't think he's necessarily insincere. It's just a lot of people who don't spend a lot of social time or really, nervous about social stuff. They have learned to kind of suppress all of their expressions. And as a result, they never match what they're saying because they don't actually express what they're saying. So
that's really interesting. I saw a video of him the other day where he had that like Orwellian newspeak conference where he was talking about how they're trying to get rid of hateful content on Facebook, and he was talking, and you could tell that it really wasn't coming from some. It sounded like he was reading North Korea's, like Jewish talking points, about the party or something. Just he was clearly parroting this sort of company policy in a really insincere and nerdy way, and in a fashion where it seemed like he just wanted to be liked and be agreeable to this paradigm of the social justice warriors, as opposed to someone who was like, you know what, this is what I really think. Let me tell you what I really believe and why I'm doing this and why I want the company to do this. It was so plastic and fake, and it just completely exacerbated the level of evil.
Exactly.
Because, it wasn't even sincere evil or coming from like a real place of concern. It was just purely talking points. Right. It was gross.
You get the feeling like Silicon Valley is full of people who are just pretending. Every time I see one of these CEOs interviewed, they're lying and pretending. They're phonies. And I think that there's something in big corporate culture. Number one, there is a phoniness in big corporate culture. I know because I've been there. And number two, Silicon Valley is full of social misfits.
Well, Silicon Valley, the TV show, is the greatest, one of my favorite shows of all time.
I've seen so many clips from that crack me up so bad, and they're so real.
It's the greatest show ever. And it's done by the same guy that does that did Office Space movie, Mike Judge.
Oh,
the guy that
really?
Started Beavis and Butthead and did the Office Space. Oh, he's a genius.
Oh man, now I'm excited.
It's so good. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right.
All right. So everybody run, don't walk to this Charisma on Command channel. It's so much fun. But set aside some time, dude, because you're not going to stop. You're going to click, 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 click. And then you're going to subscribe. So there you go. And
This
I'm
is a
going to
cult.
study this thing.
You're going to send your money.
Just buy the T-shirt right in advance because it's over for you. And it's just kind of, it's not ironic, but it is funny that this channel is so good at being charismatic. And I think that's what interests me as a YouTuber is just, oh my God, how do I do that? When I start making videos again, I'm launching like this. Like I'm going to put together 8-minute vignettes with awesome titles and pictures, Because, I mean, to be honest, the content isn't so revolutionary. Like, you could put the amount of insightful content that they're giving you in a pamphlet. But they have one of the most awesome YouTube channels I've ever seen. So there you go. All right. So what else did I want to talk about? I was listening to this video interview of Ira Glass. And Ira Glass is the guy who produces and stars, and he creatively came up with This American Life, which is probably the greatest radio show. And if you do not listen to this show, you really must. And the only reason why I cringe and sometimes have trouble listening to This American Life is that it's so left. And this is a show produced with public radio, right? So it's the people who work there. It's so far left that it makes you...
That's why I can't watch anything on it. I can't listen to anything on NPR.
Yeah, I mean,
even though it's well done.
You have to pick the topics that don't get political, and they do a lot of that. They actually do a lot of content that's just more really funny, real life kind of stories, and they don't have a political connection. And in this interview, I was even saying that as he's gotten older, he's become less, he's still really opinionated, but he's less intolerant and kind of more empathetic toward people. I mean, as he's done this show, he kind of realizes that everybody's got a story. And he did a show on Christians, I think, in this country, which he did it very fairly and very empathetically. It's not like he's hating on Christians because he's on the left or something. So things like that. It's a really, really good show. I do recommend it, even though he's like that. But what struck me is I listened to, it was a 2-part interview. First hour, really interesting. He's a really interesting guy. He's talking about his early days and how he got the show started. And it's just kind of like a story of how did you put together this amazing radio show and actually succeed? And, it's a personal narrative story. It's really interesting. That's the first hour. Part 2. 10 minutes in, these two very smart people, the interviewer and Ira Glass, start talking about environmentalism. And they start saying how we're all going to die in 10 years if we don't fundamentally transform our society. I mean, it's literally the Green New Deal that they have bought, hook, line, and sinker. And I'm like, these people are smart. These people are really smart people. I've just listened to this really awesome interview. And then suddenly I feel like I'm listening to a caveman,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Who has just, what? No, the earth isn't going to explode in 10, we're all going to die in 10 years or rather, it wasn't like we were all going to die in 10 years. It was, in 10 years, it won't be reversible. It'll be like this freight train that we can't control, and our kids won't live on an earth with fresh air. Or green grass, or... Yeah,
it's like talking to someone really smart, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, I have to go to my spaceship now. I'm going to, the outer regions.
We're doing Jell-O shots tonight with cyanide in it because the UFO
because Gary said so,
I mean, it was like that. And then, oddly, the next day, I read an article by Daniel Greenfeld in Front Page Magazine called The Brainwashing of a Nation. And I'm just going to quote from that. Here, there's a couple paragraphs. I'm just going to quote this. So this is a conversation about cults, everybody. And I listened to these smart guys talk about environmentalism, and I thought, oh my God, this is a religion. This is the only way you could be smart and believe this is if you're just completely brainwashed, indoctrinated. full on. These are people in the news who undoubtedly have heard the theories about the sun, that big ball of heat in our solar system might have something to do with our temperatures.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. And they don't care. They also have access to all the scandals and the fraud that's come out of the IPCC and all the data fakery and the emails saying how they're faking data, scientists who disagree. I mean, I know they have access to this, right? Or have been exposed to this. And they still think that we should stop using oil right now and tear down the inefficient buildings. Just like Ocasio-Cortez. And you think, when we listen to her, we think she's appealing to stupid people. But that's not what she's doing.
Not at all, no.
She's appealing to the smartest people around. That is what's so freaking scary.
And so that's what Greenfeld says, right? So
here's what Greenfeld says, and here's the quote. Smart people make the best brainwashing targets. Cults recruit bright students on college campuses. They target aspiring executives looking for leadership training and dissatisfied professionals searching for meaning. Cults are rarely made up of stupid people. They're made up of smart, vulnerable people. Human beings don't behave rationally. We rationalize our behavior. The more people rationalize, the more they can be brainwashed. So he has a great analogy here. Your old Casio digital watch can't be hacked. Even if it were hacked, there's not much it could be made to do. Your smartphone can be hacked and made to do more. Your desktop can be hacked and made to do even more. Intelligence doesn't make us less vulnerable. It leaves us much more vulnerable. So I just found that really interesting. And then I thought about my own kind of intellectual journey. And as an objectivist, somebody who read Ayn Rand and kind of agreed with the whole system, objectivists are accused of being in a cult a lot. And even though we have a philosophy that stresses independent-mindedness, like that's literally one of the virtues that she lists, reason as man's only means of knowledge, that you must think and you must think independently. She wrote a whole novel about not being second-handed in your thinking for yourself. Like that's The Fountainhead, in case anybody hasn't heard of it, where Howard Rourke, he's an architect, and everybody's telling him that he shouldn't be designing the way he's designing, but he's like, I'm going to design the way that I think is best. I'm not going to use old versions or whatever. He's going to do his thing. That was called being first-handed versus the other character in the novel, Peter Keating, who's second-handed. He only adopts what's been done before and what's approved of. He only reads books that are approved of. So that's Ayn Rand. And yet, objectivists don't always act that way. So anyway.
No, it's quite the contrary.
Well, unfortunately, yeah. I think that's where we get into trouble, is that we have a few people, or rather organizations, that have decided that they are the keepers of the flame. And on the one hand, I kind of agree that objectivism isn't just anything, and that you can't just come in and make up stuff and say this is objectivism. But objectivism should be a philosophy for kind of learning about, well, let me just tell you what my take on objectivism is. Here's the main things that I agree with, that run my life and continue to run my life. Number one, that as a human being, my means of survival is thinking. It's not claws, it's not teeth, it's thinking. And so I really need to try to be as objective as possible about everything.
You do have big claws, though. By the way.
There's that.
Just wanted to, in case no one's met you.
My teeth aren't so shabby either.
Thinking, reason.
Thinking, being objective. That's how you make good decisions and live a good life, right? And that makes sense. Like that's like identifying the nature of what a human being is and what you need to survive and thrive. And that's thinking. And thinking well. And so developing a good thinking method, making sure that you're always checking your thinking against reality. And I've tried to live like that. my whole life, my whole adult life. I read Ayn Rand when I was 17. I said, this is it. This is how you live a good life. You think and you make sure, it doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but I'm always trying to check my thinking and my ideas against reality, against outcomes, and reset, rethink if I need to. The second thing is her ethics, which is rational self-interest. So that's selfishness, but in a long-range way where it's like it's moral. It's your moral duty, actually, to look out for yourself, to put your interests first, then your interests, the interests of your family first. This doesn't mean clobber other people, but it does mean that you come first. Your cancer treatment comes before giving cancer treatment to your neighbor. If you want to be charitable. Like, you don't do something like that. That's a sacrifice. You need to come first, and it's moral to put yourself first. We really have to, it's a longer discussion to differentiate it between hedonism and doing drugs. And, it's not about seeking
you've
pleasure.
identified two really core aspects of her ideas that come together in a way that most philosophies, it doesn't come together, which is using reason, thinking about this world and about integrating reality with your thinking, as opposed to, mystic thinking or, religious thinking or some other form of thinking. And the idea that you come first, that self-interest is actually a virtue, not a vice.
It's not a necessary evil.
Completely different than the norm.
So this is that's the revolutionary philosophy as I see it. And those are the two things that I always check everything by, I want to make sure that I'm thinking clearly, that I'm being objective, that I'm open to being wrong, and that I'm always checking, I'm always circling. Is this still true? Is this still match reality? And then secondly, that I'm pursuing my self-interest. And, as a political policy, for example, if I'm thinking about politics, I'm trying to be rational. I'm looking at facts of reality. I'm looking at history. And then I'm saying, is this in my interest? Is this in my interest and the interest of my country, if it's foreign policy? So, and that's long range. It's not today. I'm going to get this handout today from the government, and that's in my interest. That's not actually in my interest, because tomorrow I'll be the one giving the handout against my will, right? So I'm against handouts. I think it's best to have freedom. Freedom is obviously the best environment for human beings to thrive. And I guess we're assuming that thriving human being is our ultimate value. So I'm assuming that my life is my ultimate value. So I think that has served me well, and it's why I don't feel like I'm in a cult, because I'm always thinking. I don't just accept what the objectivist intellectuals tell me that they think about things in their applications of those two, of their reason and their judgment and what they think is being self-interested. I often don't agree with them. I occasionally don't agree with Ayn Rand. But I also think that she was writing at a different time and with a different context. But I don't know. What do you think, Doug? You're an objectivist. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's interesting that we were talking about this, and I had told you, and we had both read this article by Connor Barnes and Quillette called Sad Radicals. And where I was coming from this whole cult idea was this excellent article, and it's about this guy who was, in a radical anarchist, part of this SJW woke, movement. And he wrote this article, which I encourage everyone to read, where he really characterizes and explains what he was going through.
I have a quote from that.
Oh, okay.
When you're done setting it up, I'll read the quote.
Okay. Well, he goes through it and talks about, and what's fascinating to me about the article is that it could be read on two levels. One is the way in which the left and the hard left now that we're all suffering with why it is they are the way they are and how much of a cult religion it's become and why. And so you can just read it just on just to understand the left
Can
and
I
understand what we're
interject here?
dealing with.
That's what I felt when I was listening to these guys talk. Like, I suddenly realized what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with kind of savages. I'm dealing with, like, what's that freaking religious group that goes out to funerals and holds up signs?
Yeah, those
These
Baptist
people
guys are.
freaking deeply feel fear over the end of the world.
Yes.
They're
and
freaking afraid of it. And they think that we're out of our minds, that we aren't dropping everything and destroying our society to protect the earth now, because otherwise we're going to be dead and our kids are going to be dead. Like, they freaking passionately believe this. And they are not affected by any contrary evidence.
Yes. And that's one of the aspects, what I was just going to, the second level, what you just said is really important to the second level of this, which is that it's sort of an article about cultism, abstractly, just like what makes something a cult, not just these radical anarchist woke people, but, what makes a certain religion a cult, what makes, certain people that I think in objectivism very cult-like, or libertarianism, or whatever ideology or political program that's out there. You find this tendency that people have to become cult-like in how they approach these problems. And so what you're saying is exactly right. And one of the aspects that you're referring to particularly is, he talks about how, when you're a rational person, you're looking at reality and you're open to new ideas and what he called discordant arguments, arguments that are different or that challenge you because you want to be able to answer them.
I think I have a quote from this. So the article is Sad Radicals, and it really is interesting because it's a view in to the mindset of what we're fighting. These crazy people, they're literally in cults. Okay, so here's a quote from it. When I was part of groups like this, everyone was on exactly the same page about a suspiciously large range of issues. This is how you know you're in a cult, right, Doug? And I would say that some objectivists are like this.
Absolutely.
Like, they think we should all agree on immigration, and if we don't, you're not a real objectivist. Go fuck yourself. You're in a cult. If you're an objectivist who has ever said that to anybody, you are in a cult of your own making.
Yes.
All right, more on this quote. When my friends and I did have theoretical disagreements, they tended toward the purely strategic or to the philosophic minutia. Minutia, sorry. Deep and sincere engagement with opposing points of view is out of the question. Radicalism is like a clan too suspicious of outsiders to abandon cousin marriage. And like incestuous offspring, this is such a great analogy, radicalism's intellectual offspring accumulate genetic load. Narrow theories must perform increasingly convoluted explanations of the world. When a worldview encounters discordant knowledge, it can either evolve to accommodate it, or it can treat it as a threat to the worldview's integrity. If a worldview treats all discordant knowledge as a threat, then it is an ideology. Its adherents learn to see themselves as guardians. Rather than seekers of the truth.
I love that because
such a good quote.
This guardian idea, right? Yeah. You see this in a lot of political movements.
Environmentalists are absolutely guardians.
They're guardians because, remember, the science is over.
Right.
And to me, that's like the key phrase that distinguishes cult from reason is the science is over. We have learned as much as we're going to learn. That's it. Now it's time to do what we're going to do. So even if you present new facts to these people and new information and new data, no, the science is over. We're not going to even listen to you.
Right.
It's an incredible claim. And, the one aspect, and I wrote a huge post
or you hear,
last year.
In objectivism, you hear, well, Ayn Rand, in an off-the-cuff, 4-worded paragraph in 1960 said that she would be because she's an immigrant, she's for open immigration. She didn't exactly say it like that. therefore you can't be an objectivist.
Right.
And then it's just like, wait a
Completely.
second. Objectivism means think for yourself, put yourself first, be rational. That's what objectivism means. It doesn't mean be an open borders fanatic.
Well, I think also,
in spite
I mean,
of the hordes of savages streaming across the border right now.
yeah, I mean, if you're open to, if somehow you find yourself advocating like, okay, 6 billion people can come to the United States.
Yeah, we'll be fine. It'll be fine.
It will be fine. It'll be fine.
Because
something's
individual
wrong
rights, you fucking are doing it wrong, man. I've said the F word 4 times in the show already.
Yeah, you're going to get us banned. But
yeah,
I want to make this point real quick. The issue of what makes something a cult, like there is not just religious thinking or mystic thinking. I made this mistake, I think, when I was younger. I used to think, well, we all have this idea of what is a cult? It's devotion, and there's an intensity of devotion maybe to a certain person or a character, and it's a life-altering devotion where it's not just something you do on Sundays, but it's it's something that you base your life around. And then there's an element of religion to it, in that you can't prove anything, but we just believe, it's faith-based. And what I realized is that that's not really the essential. Religion is often part of it because I think it gets to bad thinking, but you can also succumb to cultish thinking or be in a cult even when it's not religion, when it's completely secular, as we're seeing with the environmentalists, and we see some aspects of this in objectivism or libertarianism or whatever, where you can certainly succumb to dogma through bad thinking methods. And I wrote a post about contextualized thinking, and we've talked about this a lot, but there's a certain epistemological method where when you're approaching ideas and knowledge, and to be scientific, you leave yourself open to new facts. Certain things, but everything is understood within a context. For example, I use the example that I got from Leonard Peikoff about the virtue of honesty. If you find yourself saying, well, I can't lie to a kidnapper, I have to tell him, lying is bad, dishonesty is bad, so I have to tell the kidnapper where my kid is, because that would be lying if I don't. If you find yourself doing that, you've got some really serious problems, and you're thinking, where you don't understand the principle of, or the concept of honesty, that virtue is understood in a context. You're trying to, the ultimate goal is to preserve your life and to be self-interested. And so in the context of lying to a kidnapper, you're actually serving justice or you're serving honesty, because that guy's trying to kill your kid. And so, you have every right to lie to a kidnapper. And so if you said, well, God told me I should never lie, so, the kidnapper is asking me where my child is, I have to tell him the truth because God told me, or because Ayn Rand told me, or whatever, that's dogma. That's dogmatic thinking. And so, and this type of thing is, I think, the axis around which cults form, not religion per se, but flawed epistemology. And whether you're in, and here these environmentalists are overtly supposedly scientific, and they're not. They're anti-science.
Right. But they think that they're the rational scientific ones. And they are on, I'm still struggling to kind of even figure out how their minds can work. How can Ira Glass be so scared of basically a big giant hoax, a big lie that's really pretty? Even if you're kind of an environmentalist, I don't know, there have been so many things debunked, like the recent articles about how recycling doesn't do any good, and but we still need to have 5 trash cans and do our ritualized garbage separation in order to appease the environmental gods.
Well, I wanted to make another point. It is an observation I've had throughout my life, because I've dealt with, you were talking before about, and Great Greenfield's point that cults appeal to really smart people. I've dealt with like brilliant people who are, maybe deeply, devoutly religious, or, right. Maybe a little bit cult-like in some of their beliefs and everything. And what I've found is that some of these people who are very intelligent are looking for a system. the more thoughtful you are, the more coherent your philosophy needs to be for you to feel good about it.
Right.
So if you're dumb and you just say, oh, well, whatever, I don't know what's happening today, I guess I'm going to eat a taco, I don't know. But I mean, if you're thinking deeply and you're thinking about the world and your place in it and why and what's your purpose and what's the meaning of life, you want to make all these connections. And if someone makes those connections for you in a way that's consistent and, that resonates with you emotionally and psychologically, maybe it's religion or whatever is presented to you, you are very susceptible to succumbing to that thought system. And,
it's almost like because you are a master rationalizer. Like that's what you have to think that you are. You have to realize you are. You're so smart. You require, like you said, more order, structure, and system, and more consistency. And as a result, you have to explain away a lot of stuff. Anything
Yes.
that might intrude on that, you have to, and you get really, really good at rationalizing.
Mm-hmm.
You're a master rationalizer. And that's
because
how you
everything
can be
has
crazy.
to fit. Because then what happens is, rather than look at reality and facts and integrating those into your thoughts, you've got this sort of castles in the sky, ideology that's all connected together. And if one piece doesn't fit, you've got a problem on your hands. That whole thing, the house of cards can come crashing down. So rather than let that happen, you rationalize things and you rationalize, faults or failures in your system because you fear that system coming crashing down. You've now developed an identity and a psychology around that system working. And so, you look at something like Marxism, where, why did Marxism resonate so much in the West, and why did it become a system that, ended up killing hundreds of millions of people and is still haunting us today? Well, it's a system, and it hits all the hot spots. There's oppression, so there's a sense of morality and the ethics of sacrifice built into it, which already resonates with a lot of people. And it has sort of a secular explanation. You're not saying it's God, which a lot of smart people don't like, but it's offering a secular explanation based on economics and science. And it's saying we can plan the world and we're going to have a utopia and everyone's going to live happily ever after. And these ideas, that whole system of thought, this oppressor versus the oppressed, and it offers an explanation of why things are bad. Well, there's evil capitalists and they're racists and they're killing the Indians and, everything is, and, sad radicals. This article explains a lot of that as well.
There's definitely something about those people that they can't handle chaos or something. Like they can't handle freedom scares the shit out of them. I don't know why they feel like everything and everyone needs to be managed. They don't, it really makes them uneasy. It's almost a psychological problem. This need for a system. And don't get me wrong, I actually feel like I have a grounded philosophy that makes sense and I have principles. That's what objectivism gave me. But one thing that I've learned, I guess I should say, is that the more and honestly, you hear old people say this, if you don't experience this yourself, something is wrong and you need to check yourself, and it's this. If you aren't, the more you learn, the dumber you feel. You're doing it wrong, because the more you learn about history, it's going to intrude on some of your held ideas. You're going to go, oh, okay, well, I had that political issue. I was on that side of the political issue. And then I learned these things about it. Mm-hmm. And then I learned the history about it. And then I learned these facts. And then I learned this science. And as you go through life, you learn more and more and more stuff. You have more experiences. You have more empathy for people because you've been through more. It expands your wisdom. And if with that doesn't come kind of this sense of, I do have my opinions, but I also realize that they can really change because I've had that happen to me a few times where I had an opinion about something and I've completely changed it. I used to be pro open borders personally. And it took me, I guess 9/11 happened. And then, so I was against Muslim immigration. I'm still for that. I'm for a total frickin' ban. Like, you would have to apply and prove to me that you're Ayaan Hirsi Ali before I would let you in from a Muslim majority country. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that isn't a thing after 9/11. Of course they're dangerous. And
well, you switched from being a guardian in your thinking, like,
I don't know that I don't think I was a guardian. This is what I'm trying to say is you can hold opinions, but if they're not subject to evolving when you get more information, then you are a guardian. Then you're just, you're not thinking anymore. So my experience has been I've changed a number of opinions because reality didn't fit with them anymore. I learned some fact that changed my mind. If you're not capable of changing your mind, you're in that mode of thinking where you're rationalizing everything you learn to fit in with your already figured out opinions.
Well, yeah, that's dogma and avoid. I mean, and that's why I think there's so much vitriol in some of these arguments, because once you have this sort of formula and you're not open to facts changing to alter the conditions of your own judgments, you're not open to those new facts, then you've got the formula and you're unassailable and no one can disagree with you, because if they do, somehow they're wrong, they're evil. So that's where you get into dogmatic, cultish sort of thinking method, is where you think you have the universal formula and that your ideas aren't held contextually and that you don't see knowledge as being open-ended. You think you have a universal formula that always works no matter what, and you're not open to new facts that can alter your judgment. And so you're just guarding your ideology rather than expanding your knowledge, and I think, and Sunny, I think we've talked about this before, where, when you have children, I used to have a certain view of like what drove human beings. And, I started to see just for my own children, the role of genetics in human development and how important that is. And,
how
just
much
like
it
blood
shapes them.
and the feelings you have towards blood relatives, your own children, and how driven and sort of primordial those feelings are towards protecting and valuing and loving your own family and your children. And you start to see
your extended family becomes more a bigger value to you too. You realize how valuable it would be to have a warm extended family that was helping you with your children.
And you start to value those bonds, and you start to see how children develop, and you start to see like how screwed up someone could be given the wrong kind of, call it environment or family or society. That if you were to grow up, for example, being brainwashed in the Middle East, in a madrasa or something like that, and, you start to realize, I guess my point is that not, people are affected by their culture, by their family, by their genetics,
I think this is
by
a
their
bigger
biology.
issue. I think what you're trying to say is that change happened, like that you've changed your mind on that.
Yeah, I've changed my mind on thinking about how to judge and evaluate
over
people.
time,
Like when you were talking about how Ira became more empathetic as he got older,
right.
That's how I've become, I guess, is what I'm saying too. And I'm more open to people who say, well, maybe that's psychology. Maybe that's, just how that person grew up and where they came from. And I'm more understanding and empathetic and also more guarded. In other words, when you talk about immigration, if someone is I don't fault the bear for trying to kill me or the lion. You recognize someone's a bear. And when we're talking about, this sad radical cult, the SJW cult, or people from Muslim countries that are radicalized that want to kill you, you have to also recognize that, yes, we believe abstractly in people's ability to learn and have free will, but the reality is that some people want to kill you. and you're not going to change their mind. And this is what we're dealing with.
We're getting into the minutia of the immigration argument. I don't really want to do that, but I just want to I think the point you're making is that you have changed your mind on that topic, and a lot of people haven't, and no matter how much you put this information in front of them, they don't change, they don't integrate it. They're guardians.
Yeah, I didn't mean it just to be immigration. I mean environmentalism. I mean the whole leftist menu of issues that they're completely intransigent on, that they will not change. And that if you disagree with them at all, you are not only wrong, you're evil.
Well, we're in that point. We are at that point, I guess, where I think that's exactly what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a massive religion almost. They don't talk to us. They're not open to a lot of them. And I'm talking about the elite, the ones that are running the show, right? Like the intellectuals on that side, the smart people who have been rationalizing all of these facts away. And now they're just at the point where they're just screaming at us, and they're just scared to death of our philosophy. They are scared of freedom. It scares them. They think that freedom means, that we're going to destroy the earth
and offend them.
So it's interesting. And I just, as an objectivist too, I do see this somewhat in our own movement. And I just encourage anybody listening who feels you might be stuck, if you're smart, if you're listening to this show, you're probably smart, right?
Of course. The smartest.
Let's be real here. Yeah. So maybe check yourself and see if you're evolving, if your ideas are evolving as you grow up. One of the things that you were bringing up about when you have kids, it really changes your outlook. It really did change me. Getting sick really changed me. Those two things in particular. And they gave me a lot more empathy, I'd say.
Yes.
And when they talk about all the European leaders being childless and how that's kind of a big deal, the old me would have blown that off. Like, what does that matter?
Yeah.
The new me is like, oh yeah, totally. They should not be running things. They don't have kids.
Yeah.
How can they possibly understand the value of generational safety? And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't think that they can actually empathize. They don't have the same feelings of protection that I do. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to die, but I need to protect my daughter. So, and her future and her children, my grandkids, that's important to me on a visceral chemical way.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
And so biological way. And they don't share that. Theresa May, Macron, who's that German bitch? Merkel.
Yeah, Merkel. Yeah, right. Yeah, I had a very rationalistic view of the world when I was younger. And by that, I mean like an abstract conception of how things should be and how people were. And, and I evaluated things and people according to that rather than understanding more, as I've gotten older and had a family and everything else. And you just learn more about human beings and psychology and what can go right and what can go wrong and how the world really is, then, you really do change. And I don't think you can probably understand it until you maybe get a little bit older. Yeah. But, and I start to see this cultish faction within
young people
our
should
movement.
Not run things, and why they often do these like crazy revolutions and stuff.
Totally.
They don't have empathy. They don't have enough of it.
They don't have, empathy is one way to put it.
So yeah, don't be guardians, everybody. That's an epistemological thing. That's a way of thinking. Always look at facts and check your ideas and be open to them being wrong.
Yeah, and debating.
Right. What else can we say? What other tips for good thinking? I don't know. Debating. That's perfect. If you feel like you can't handle arguing with people, if you can't actually get into a discussion with a friend without getting angry and kind of not being able to handle that,
you've got something wrong with you.
You've got something wrong. You need to check it.
If they're reasonable, I mean, if someone's not spitting at you,
right.
If someone's reasonable And I don't know about you, Sonny, but especially as a younger person, that's probably testosterone as well when I was younger. But, just being a young male and being kind of hyped up all the time. But I was really defensive, man. And I see this a lot in younger kids, on the right. Well, the left is obviously they're throwing bricks at people. But, just this, and Barnes talks about this in the article, this just sense of defensiveness where how dare you challenge me?
I mean, because how did you then get from there to here? If you started out like that.
I wasn't like throwing bricks. I mean, I was just.
Don't you think, when we knew each other in college, we were in a philosophy club where we were always arguing. Like that was kind of fun. That was the fun of it, was to argue.
Yeah, I think so.
And
I think,
and I don't know.
But I was also, I was rationally like a debater. I mean, I wanted to argue with people and I was open to debate, but I was also pretty
fixed,
pretty prickly. I didn't want to hear, I was more guarding, I was more the guard. Like I was willing to argue with you, but just to give you my points rather than
really super right. Like
yes.
You were just going to win.
Yeah. You could not tell me anything. Yeah. I wasn't looking to learn, nor was I looking out and trying to understand, trying to be and you see this too. And, the cultishness, being the expert on everything,
right.
Where you think this abstract set of knowledge gives you the ability to understand and reason deductively through, I'm an expert on medicine. I'm an expert on politics. I'm an expert on economics, on immigration policy. I'm an expert on everything. And I can speak to everything. And we see this a lot in our side.
I'm kind of like that. Maybe I need to check my own shit. I'm kind of like that. Like I kind of feel like I was having a conversation at a gathering the other night where somebody was saying kind of incredulously they couldn't figure out why I would think it would be a bad thing that Russia and China were kind of messing around in our hemisphere. And I just like, really? Like I was just really, I didn't even debate it. I wasn't.
You just let it go.
I wasn't curious about that guy's point of view.
You would have probably argued with him for 6 hours, like 20 years ago. I just felt like,
oh my God, uninformed. No interest in having a conversation with you. Like, how could you ever think that?
Yeah, right.
Okay, fine. You want Putin in our backyard? You're just dumb. You're just not really. You're not informed, or something. I don't know. And that's a little set in my ways. I'd say that's a little bit. The people who I enjoy being around actually are people who are kind of just genuinely curious about the world. And I feel like I have friends who read a lot. They read a lot of history. They read a lot of political science, a lot of books, and they read stuff from all points of view. And they're familiar with the enemy. Like they know the points. They're not rationalizing or hiding from the points that the other side is making.
Yeah, I think reading history is probably the most important thing you can do if you want to be a good intellectual. There's
history and political thinking. Like de Tocqueville or Hayek.
Yeah, political economy. Yeah, right. But actually knowing the facts of history is as important as anything, because you're not going to.
That's probably the most important. The facts. If just take immigration, and again, not to get too deep into this, but if you look at the history of how like empires fall or disappear, often it's coupled with some sort of crazy migration or immigration.
Right. And understanding that this has been a topic of discussion and argument since the founding of our country.
Yeah.
And, understanding what did the founding fathers think about it? Like, what is the chronology of the laws? Like, why did we have those laws? What was the context at that time? And like, why did people think that?
And it's not even an American question. It's something that's been a question forever. In the history of civilization, immigration has been a question, a problem.
It's not just immigration, it's invasion. It's like making that distinction,
Well, yeah, I want to say migration. When a mass of people migrates because of a drought or something like that, like it transforms societies. Mm-hmm. And civilizations have just winked out and disappeared after a migration hits them. So it isn't like that's happened. That has happened in history. So those are facts you can't ignore. You have to think about that and say, was that what's happening here? I don't know. Maybe it's not what's happening here, but to not look at those facts is stupid. Anyway, or it's just bad thinking, I guess is what I mean.
Right. And that's one of the things that really grates on me, particularly now, is seeing people making really abstract political arguments about whether it be immigration or foreign policy or whatever, and they don't understand or have no knowledge of, our government, like what we've done historically, like why we've done. Bro. Yeah, like why we do what we do, like what the complexities are of some of these, either wars we've been in, foreign policy problems, like why we've gotten to the state we're in. This is really complex stuff and requires a lot of knowledge. And people, there are people that devote their lives to studying one aspect of this. And for someone to come in with some really like abstract argument about the right to movement or something,
the right to movement is my favorite.
Oh my God!
Like that is such a floating piece of shit argument that they've literally just come up with that.
Yeah.
No one has ever said that in the history of mankind. And today the libertarians, we have a right to movement.
I have a right to move my fist into your face.
I have a right to health care. How about that one? Like prove
right
it.
To move into your house.
You don't have a right to frickin' movement. You have a right to try to move. So yeah. Anyway, well, what's the moral of the story here? How do we end this show? We've been talking for an hour. Don't be in a cult. Don't be a cultish. Don't drink the freaking Jello cyanide shot. That's what I feel like the environmentalists want us to do. Here, have this shot of cyanide Jello because they want to destroy our society, which will actually kill a lot of people. Like if you stop using oil tomorrow, billions would die. Billions would die if we stop using fossil fuels in the next 10 years. That's just what happened. No heat, no cooling, no plastics.
No, it's unthinkable. It's not even, it's preposterous.
No transportation. That means no medicine in rural communities. I mean, think about what that means.
For what? And for what reason?
No reason. Because of some fraudulent, you can't look at the people coming up with this science either and saying that they are somehow disinterested. They're all making tons of money. They're all government sponsored. It's all about power. I mean, wake up, right? It's just...
This is part of how I'd summarize it, too, is when you look back and we think how ridiculous and preposterous the Green New Deal is, or we think about, the environmental movement or these SJWs, and you think that there's this axis of thinking through reason and fact-based thinking versus the sort of cultish, religious, political movements that are so destructive and that are violent. And you think of the 20th century and you think of how communism rose to be a global force, or how Nazism rose, and the millions and millions of people that have been killed throughout world history from these kinds of movements, and that this is real. That
it's fucking real, everybody. This isn't. Yeah, we are living in such prosperous times. We can't really figure it out, and we can't really connect to the world where people would actually pull a trigger. Put people in concentration camps for wrong think or whatever. But that we are seeing that in these people. And I remember as a kid thinking, how did it ever happen that Germans, let the Nazis kill all those Jews and do that with the concentration camps? And I don't think that anymore. Like, I can see it. I see it in our own society now. And I know that it could happen. And we're we're not that far away.
The Germans were the smartest people, right? The Germans were the most intelligent, educated people.
Oh, yeah.
And they were most easily succumbed to this cult, this Nazi cult.
Those Nazis had reasons. They had reasons for putting Jews in they made up those reasons. They rationalized that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you see that happening today. And when you see these trends, right, in our society, on the academic left and the universities and throughout our culture, and the suppression we're seeing on social media and in comedy and in movies and everything, and you see this trend in this direction where these cults are essentially like determining the course of our society. Like, this is the fault line that we're on right now between those types of people and the trends. And the last thing they'll do is pass the law that puts us all in the concentration camp. So those out there on the right who are wanting to argue about, well, they have a right to do this or a right to do that. And
look at those history. Read a freaking history book, and that is exactly right, Doug. Step back.
Look at the big picture.
You have to look at history because, I don't know why people think you can't just pass a law setting up a concentration camp when you have relative freedom. Like, it would be impossible to achieve politically. Things happen gradually, and they happen culturally first. I don't know. We've made this point. Lots of people have made this point. Like, you can't watch free speech go away culturally and not know that right around the corner is when we actually lose the government right to free speech.
Right. They're not passing the law banning speech like tomorrow. They do it slowly and gradually, and at a point where people say, of course, we should ban that kind of speech.
Didn't they're saying establish that free speech is violent?
Yeah,
haven't
it can hurt people.
That?
Yeah, so it's just a natural thing to pass this law.
If we
Why
have
wouldn't
free
we pass
speech
this
on
law?
Facebook, the elections get meddled with. And we don't have free and fair elections if conservatives are allowed to speak. Because Russia or something.
Right. Because Russia. Goldstein.
I think Alex Jones is a Russian troll. That's what I think. I want a special counsel immediately.
Right, to investigate. Yeah, I mean, and then when the lock goes on the concentration camp gate, it's sort of like there's no uproar. It's just, just lock the gate now. No problem.
Of course, those people are dangerous. Hate speech.
Of course, we've established that.
Or worse, misinformation.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Can't be trusted.
It'll be the fake news camp. It's not Japanese internment, it's fake news internment.
Well, this is pretty deep. We'll have to come back to this at some point because it's such a deep topic. I think we just scratched the surface of it.
Yeah. Well, that's all we ever do on this show.
Yeah, we're surface scratchers.
We're surface scratchers. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. And we do have coming up, Doug's friend went to a Trump rally. And we pre-recorded that. We're going to record a little segment to stick on top of it, and then I'll get that one out probably next week. So enjoy this week's, and next week we'll talk about a Trump rally and what that's like in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the center of the universe.
Mecca.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded, and because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.